couple lived in what an animal lover would call heaven. Like, if you love animals, you love nature, this was heaven, and they had created their own heaven. But this heaven that they had made would soon become a hell of its own. What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. It's your girl G, and we are back with another video on this channel, Story Crime with G. On this channel we talk about true crime videos, and sometimes we judge people. No, not judge, we counsel people. We dish out relationship advice, you and I. So if that's something that you like, stay tuned and let's get right into this case. So today we're going to be looking at the case of John and Ann Bender on January 8, 2010, just after midnight, and was found stroking the head of her naked dead husband, who lay in their bed in their room in this luxury paradise home that they had built. And all she could say was, "I tried to stop him, but I couldn't." As Ann struck John's head, the only injury he had was one bullet wound to his head from a pistol. And Ann's story was that John had finally made good on his long history of suicidal behavior, but the evidence did not seem to match Ann's story. And so we're going to see this case, and let's start from the beginning. Who was John Bender? John was the oldest of two sons born to Paul and Maggie Bender, and from a very young age they could already tell this child was going to be a genius. His mom says that he'll say things to her like, "Hey mom, you could get that at a better price, like if you bought a pound." Whenever she buys things, his brain already does the math and tells her how much she could get if she was buying a little bit more. And by the age of, he actually taught himself to read, and he did not tell anyone, he didn't say anything. So when he was younger, he wouldn't speak early and started talking later in life. But when he started talking, he was saying sentences that were too complex for a kindergartner to just know that. And he started reading, and he told his dad he had learned how to read a lot earlier, but he didn't want to show them that ability because he feared that his dad would stop reading to him. That's like super sweet. At a very young age, he had already developed this character where he wouldn't do anything unless he was sure that he was going to do it perfectly. And for most kids, they are looking forward to their birthday and excited to have like a birthday party. But John told his mom, like, "Mom, is it okay if I don't have a birthday party?" Because even though he was smart and won competition and was excellent with numbers, he did not like people. People were not his cup of tea, and he did not really want to have to interact with people. So he was really quiet and reserved. And he actually refused the offer to go to Harvard University. When John was a teenager, he would spend his time hanging around the Penny's physics department, and he decided to enroll into school. And he was working on a project one day, and he realized that they were building parts of what's going to be a weapon in 1987, and it just dawned on him that if he chose physics as his career, whatever he did, whatever job opportunities he did, he felt like it's going to be somewhat contributing to make a weapon that will end up being used to kill people. So his desire and ambition for physics died when he discovered that. And the day that his new future and his new path was forged was when he went to visit one of his friends in Philadelphia and visited a stock exchange market and discovered that wait, there is literally something that I could do. There's an occupation that I could do where it depends on numbers that he loves, and it's purely based on his talent, and he could win and lose trades. So John was like, yeah, this is it for me. Almost immediately, John started trading and he became so good at it that his friends decided to stake him, gather their money and stake him because they knew he was going to do it. At the age of 22, John looked really good. He was built like a football player. He was about 6'3" and 250 pounds, had broad shoulders and nice chiseled jaw, and he was exactly Annie's spec. From 1992 to 1996, John was doing really good. Well, he was making like his sales, his winnings in the stock market went off the roof. So the firm, the hedge fund that he was trading with, started getting attention from big money, people who had a lot of money, and among them was George Soros. And by 1996, John was just 32 by that age, and it was predicted that he was, like, the whole of Wall Street knew that this mad genius was going to become a billionaire by the age of 40. That's just 8 years. He was going to become a billionaire, and that's a billionaire at that time. That's like 20 or 30 years ago. Billionaire at that time would be like so much money right now, especially if he was like, he's smart, so he would have invested it wisely, and he would have been a billionaire at that time. In March of 1989, that's when John met Annie. Now, Annie was a little spoiled brat. At this point, she was 28 years old, but she was born in Rio de Janeiro, where she's the second child of 2 kids, and her dad was a Chase Manhattan executive. So they kind of had I think she had an averagely good life or an above average life, and the dad worked in Rio with her mom Gigi, and Annie had traveled for a bit. She was a little bit of an expat and was a little brat. She had moved from Lisbon to London and then to New York. John had purchased a farm called the Golden Mountain Farm, which was a 100-acre farm in Virginia, and Annie had she had a degree, she was going through this crazy partying lifestyle, and she had bipolar disorder, and she decided to move to Virginia during one of her manic moments. And she said she didn't feel like it was an incorrect move, but she felt like that was a mood that she was in when she decided to move to Virginia. So Annie had moved to Virginia, and she had just made a few friends, and one of the friends invited her over to a party, and this was at John's place. And immediately she saw him. He was exactly her type. Her mom says that Anne had always been attracted to men who are like masculine and manly, physically and mentally as well, and John was exactly that. He could be like really arrogant, and like that was Annie's thing. So she saw him and she liked him instantly, and when John saw her, the first thing that he noticed was her hands were trembling, and so he was like, "Can I get you some water?" And Annie was like, with zero filter, she's like, "No, it's okay," that she's just on a massive dose of lithium, which she's taking for her bipolar disorder. And John was like, well, he too knows a lot about manic depressions because those had colored his life over the years, and the two of them used to have similar type of, it could literally be like the end of the world when they go into a manic depression, and that's something that they really bonded over. When John would go on a manic attack, it helped him work, and he also had obsessive compulsive disorder, which was something that helped him go in, like he could work for 20 hours straight for one day and he'll be fine. This also helped his career in Wall Street. Despite the fact that this couple had like these mental health issues, their families were very supportive of their relationship. They bonded over that, and it was something that they felt like they had so many things in common, and it really drew them close. And their families were like, well, they like each other, so what are they gonna do? Now, John decided that he would like to go somewhere different after he has gathered at least a little bit of money from trading. He wanted to move to somewhere, and he was thinking somewhere Costa Rica or Brazil, and he shared this with Annie, and Annie was like, well, I've already been to Brazil, so they decided on Costa Rica. In a place called La Florida de Barú, which is just about 22,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean. In Costa Rica, no one actually wanted to live there, even Costa Ricans. Nobody wanted to buy land there because people who lived there did not have like electricity, and they only lived in like small huts or cabins that had been beaten by the weather, and the way to access their house was like a narrow path, and when it rains it becomes really sloppy. It was this primitive lifestyle in a rainforest that no one was crazy about. But then in 1989 there came John and Anne, and they dropped $10 million on a 5,000 acre land in the middle of the rainforest. Now, in the middle of this 5,000 acre rainforest piece of land that they had bought in the middle of nowhere, John and Annie built, in the span of 4 years, a 120,000 square foot eco-friendly open concept circular home. And this home, it had no windows, it had a helicopter pad, it had a sculpted garden, and also a waterfall from behind, and a pool. And it took them 4 years to get all of this done. It was gorgeous. So this home of theirs was not surrounded by any, they didn't have it fenced. There were no external walls to protect the home, so it was free for animals to come in and out as they please. And the remaining space that was left, they made it like a safe haven for endangered or sick or wounded animals from around. And they had rangers around to provide security, and they also had vets and caretakers to care for the sick animals whenever they needed help. So these guys were living in paradise in a rainforest. I can only imagine the waterfall. Like, yeah, it'll be everything to wake up to that every morning. But not the animals though, it's like too much. All of this beauty, peace, and nature that they enjoyed did not last that long, because in 2001, John was being sued by a former client and the Costa Rican neighbors, people in their surroundings, were not very pleased because they were no longer allowed to use the property for hunting. Remember, he's trying to save animals and preserve lives, so it was giving them some tension with the locals. With all of this threat happening in 2002, there was an armed intruder that attacked their property, and all of this took a heavy toll on Annie, and she became manic. And not just that, her physical body began to break down and began to deteriorate. Now, John, watching Annie go through all of that, became manic as well. It just triggered his own manic attack, and he was just focused. His OCD just turned into finding a solution for Annie, trying to find a way to cure whatever was disturbing her, and that's all that he focused on, which also took a toll on his health. So they decided that they were going to leave Costa Rica for 3 months and then return and try to liquidate everything that they have, about $90 million that they had invested in a Costa Rican trust that was supposed to be administered by, I'm about to destroy this name. It was supposed to be administered by a local attorney who is called Juan, I'm sure the J is H, so Juan de Dios Alvarez. I hope I did it right. But as time went, Anne's health only began to deteriorate even more, and the sicker she got, the worse John became, because he felt like he was failing her, and for some reason he believed that the water in that rainforest was what was going to cure Annie. So what did he do? He decided to start injecting her with concoctions that he had made out of it. So Annie describes that her last 2 days with John were just really bad. They were just really, really bad, because she said they would start to rehearse a plan for him to end himself. Yeah, they would begin to do rehearsals for that, which was just psychotic. When Annie had like prolonged manic periods, she had this strong desire that she wanted Tiffany lamps, and they started collecting it. And by 2010, she had about 550 of them, because John would do anything to make her feel better. And an American neighbor who had a farm just close to the Benders would say whenever he passed by their house, it always looked dark except their bedroom, where one of those lamps would be bright and shining in it. Bear in mind that John's house had been patrolled by not less than 9 guards, and as the time his end came by, those guards were being forbidden from entering the house, and they saw less and less of John. And one of the guards only described how he saw Don John carrying Annie gently from like one room to another, but like from very far. On that fateful night, Annie explains that it was just a regular day, and they had gone through their evening routine, because John they were playing Fallout 3. That's what John liked. And when he finally said, "I'm ready for bed," what she could think in her head is, oh wow, they've finally gone through another day. And so she said she was already in bed, and he liked to have his pillow arranged in a particular order, so he was doing that. And she felt like she was slipping in and out of sleep, and she couldn't really hear what he was saying, but she thinks she heard him say something like, "You don't know how it feels to wake up and see your spouse lying half dead next to you." And so she turned and kind of like opened her eyes, and she saw the shining light, and she could see that John had a gun, a pistol to his head, because they had 2 pistols that he acquired legally and 2 AK-47s that were not so legally acquired for his own protection, aside from the armed guards around the house. So she saw that close to him, and so she said she woke up and was in a kneeling position, and her first instinct was to try to get the gun. But when she did, it slipped through her hands and it went off, and so she jumped off to go to John's side of the bed, and she could see blood dripping. She could see there was red substance, and so she grabs a phone and calls the guard, like post 5, help. And this guard has to call his supervisor because he needs access to the private elevator. And she says that given how sick she was definitely in shock, because she found herself running around when she honestly did not have the energy to be able to do that, but she was able to do that. And when the guard walked in, he saw Annie in a pool of red substance just stroking John's unalived body, and says the guy took her downstairs, like she just got on her email and emailed her. She said she emailed her parents and then called her brother, and her first words were like, he finally did it. And this was days after John's parents had been emailing him, and he wouldn't respond to emails from worried parents. He would just only talk to Annie and email her back and forth. There was even a letter he sent to her at some point when she's on doctor's appointment. So he wasn't really in a lot of communication with other people. And by 11 a.m. that morning, Annie was like inland in the police station, willingly giving her witness statement. Immediately from the police station, Anne called her doctor, Dr. Lindsay, and was like, her husband just ended himself and she needs him to admit her right now. Like, she needed help, and the doctor says by the time she came, she looked so frail, so thin, she couldn't hold a cup of coffee, and she was literally 80 pounds, and all of her skin was covered in wounds and balls, and most of the balls they found was from injection marks from the injections that John had been giving her. At this point, the doctor says that Annie was just aware of things. She's aware that her husband is dead, but she doesn't really comprehend what that means, and she's just out of it. And he describes that his diagnosis was that she was having a shared psychosis, where it's a disorder where one person with psychosis influences or causes an induced psychosis on someone else who does not have that. Now, in 2011, the Costa Rican police arrested Anne for the murder of John Bender, and despite her mental health issues. And at this point, she was literally at the mercy of this guy, this trustee we talked about, Mr. Alvarez. And this is because she had signed an agreement waiving all of her rights to John's properties, John's wealth. And at this point, cash flow was not, there was very little to no cash flow. So from the very go, Anne was already under suspicion, and this is because the prosecution, her defense lawyer said that after he had reviewed the case, he had said that she had been under suspicion since 72 hours after everything happened. This is because the forensic evidence showed that blood patterns first did not match her story. Forensic evidence showed that John had been sleeping when that happened, and also when the bullet casing landed, the location of the gun showed that the crime scene had been staged after John had been shot, and it seemed as though there's supposed to be gunpowder residues on John's hands, but none was found on it, given that if he had ended himself. And so over the years, Annie had been tried over and over, and also she was at the mercy of this trustee guy, Alvarez, and it showed that Alvarez over the years had been stealing money, had been embezzling money from John's trustee account, and he had even bought properties and had a lavish lifestyle all under John's account. So the prosecution could not really find a motive, because they just need to prove that, hey, this doesn't match. They don't really need to have a motive. And at some point, they found a lot of gemstones, like really expensive ones, in the Bender's property, and they were like, okay, maybe they were trying to avoid taxes and buy some were illegal, some they did not really have documents and duties paid for. So maybe they were trying to find something that was tax-free, and then the wife decided to end the husband and run away with the money. And Anne was like, wait, she showed like collections of diamonds, that is like lots of diamonds and jewelry that they have, some 2.2 million, another set of jewelry that was like 8.5 million, and she's like, they have all of these things. Why? It doesn't make sense that she was trying to kill her husband to run away with his money. Another crime scene detail that led to some suspicion was because John was left-handed, but the bullet was from his right side and from the back of his head. And his defense lawyer was like, it is possible to shoot with your right hand, and that would explain why the gun and the casing landed in the locations that it was landed. So after all the back and forth during the trial, the jury was just in the middle, and they were like, it's possible that Anne ended her husband, but it's possible that it was a suicide. So they don't have enough evidence to convict her, hence she is being acquitted. But then because they're in Costa Rica and there is no double jeopardy law, and this case is being appealed. She had already been tried 3 times and acquitted, and the case keeps being appealed, which means that a higher court can order that there is a new trial, because they were like, maybe she got acquitted because of a deal that she carried out with one of the judges prior to the whole case happening, that could have impacted the ruling. And the thing is, she cannot leave the country until the appeal is over, which can take 6 months to a year, which means that she's really at their mercy, and the government and the persecution could just keep doing this all the time. What do you guys think? Do you think that I really don't see any motive? There's always a clear motive: a cheating husband, money, something, but there's always a clear motive. And in this case, both of them were in like really bad conditions mentally at the time that this happened. So even if she did do it, was she doing it in her right senses at that point? Because like, he was injecting her with stuff. Is that why she wanted to make it stop? And if she did not do it, like, maybe he was just threatening to use the gun, and her panic made it fire. What do you guys think? Do you think this was murder or it was suicide? That was it from today's case. I'm actually hung on this one. I don't even have way to roll, because it's just like, she could have done it to make him go away and let her try to heal herself. And I think from the very get-go, it was just a really bad idea that both of them, suffering from mental health, a mental illness, which is not something that you can go and take, let's say, shots for and it will be gone, or you can see the progress, the healing happen. It's quite difficult for one person to handle, and then 2 people to handle with all of the isolation that they're no longer with their families, they're no longer with like friends or people that they grew up accustomed to. I think it was just a lot of stress that they placed on themselves. And what do you guys think could have happened? What do you think they should have done to get a different outcome? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.